Welcome back everyone to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial, and in today's video we shall create these quick slots right here. So from our player equipment we cannot add any of these items to our quick slots, but from our backpack and our player slots we can add any item we want. So let me show you how this works. So we have some, as you can see, some backpack items. If we would drop the backpack, those get removed from our quick slots, and also if we drop items on the ground, as you can see, they also are getting removed from our quick slots. So before we begin, there is one small thing that I want to mention, is that if we open up our game and let's say we press I, nothing really happens on the first click, something only happens on the second click. And we have a small issue in our third person character, and that is because on our begin play we are creating the HUD, adding it to the viewport and setting this to be our UI variable. But in our create widget function we are checking first if our UI is visible, and if it's true it is removing the widget. And of course our HUD is visible, so that's why we are having this issue. So instead of having the UI to be set as a HUD, we need another variable. So let's promote our HUD to be a variable and let's call this UI HUD. There are multiple reasons for this. First and foremost is because, well, we will need to refresh our HUD from time to time because we are going to store our quick slots in this HUD. And for our UI variable we do need some kind of variable in this to make it valid for the first time when we try to open something. So what I'm gonna do is simply create a widget. So user interface create widget, and just simply create any widget. I'm gonna use the inventory widget, but it doesn't really matter which one you use, but do not add it to the viewport. Just simply create it and set it to be this variable. So now it fixes this issue. So now let's start working on our quick slots. First thing that we need is, in my inventory folder I'm going to create a new blueprint structure, and I'm gonna call this as quick slots. And inside of this structure right here we need two entries. So the first one is going to be the item source, so basically where the item is stored, and that's going to be a string for me. And also we need the index of that specific item, which is going to be an integer. Now that's it for this one. One thing that I want to do is, for the item source, by default I want to type in empty, so that we know that that specific slot is actually empty and it's not taken by our equipment backpack or perhaps our player slots. Now the next thing what I want to do is, in my third person character I want to create a function that will refresh our HUD. So to do so, let's create a custom event and let's call this refresh HUD. And for this one let's drag in our newly created UI HUD and let's remove it from the parent. So remove from parent. Then the next thing what I want to do is simply create our widget, which is again going to be our UI HUD. Then we want to add to the viewport, and then we want it to set it to our UI HUD, like so. So now we are going to be able to refresh our HUD. Now the next thing is, let's create a new variable which is going to hold our quick slot. So I'm going to call this quick slots, and this needs to be our s quick slots structure. And let's make this into an array since we want to have multiple quick slots, and in my case I want to have 8, so I'm going to add 8 entries to my array. Now let's create a function which is going to allow us to remove these quick slots. So I'm going to call this quick slot removal. And for this one we need quite a few inputs, so let's create one of these which is going to be called the source. So basically where is the item located in. Then we need the item index, so let's make this into an integer. And the last one I'm going to call this single, and this is going to be a boolean, and basically this is going to represent whether we want to remove a single quick slot or maybe we want to perhaps remove multiple. And in this case I'm going to use the backpack, so once we drop the backpack, so that we would remove all of the backpack items from our quick slots. So now let's promote our index to a local variable, and let's call this local index. So local index, there we go. Then I want to do a if branch check from single, so let's do an if, and if it's true then let's promote our source to a local variable and let's call this local source. Of course, if you have many different sources and not just two, like in my case, I'm going to have only the player slots and the inventory to be stored in the quick slots, then perhaps you want to promote this to a variable before you do the if branch. Now, the next thing that I want to do is drag in my quick slots, and let's do a loop for each with a break. Then on this one, let's break the RI element. Let's get the quick slots. And here what we want to check for is that the item source is equal to our local source. So let's connect that one over here. And also what we want to check for is that our index is equal to our local index. So we want to find that specific item in our quick slots. Then from both of these, we can do a AND Boolean check to make sure that both of these are true. Then on our loop body, we can run a if branch check using this AND value as our condition. So if both of these are true, then we want to drag in our quick slots and set an RI element. So on true, and the index is going to be the index from the loop. So let's use the RI index. And for the item, let's simply make one. And this is going to be an empty item with index 0. Now, once we've done this, from the set RI element, we can go to the break to break the loop, since we only want to remove a single item. Now, let's work on the false route over here. And on the false, we again want to do a loop. But in this case, we're going to do a regular loop. We want to loop through the whole entire thing of our quick slots variable. And then on this one, again, let's break the RI element, so break the structure. And on the item source, we want to check if this is equal to our inventory, so basically our backpack, because that's the only way we want to remove all the quick slots, only if it's from the backpack. So once we drop it, then let's do a if branch check on this one. And just like before, again, on the quick slots, we want to set the RI element. So on true, we are setting the RI element with the index from the loop again. And the item itself is going to be the empty item, so we can reuse this node right here. Now, on both of these being completed, we want to refresh our HUD. So let's run our refresh HUD. And we can run this from both of the loop completions. So this is my function right here. I'm going to compile and save this, and now let's actually run this function. So first, let's go to remove amount at index. So over here, so let's see, here we are checking whether if this is the equipment. So if it's not the equipment, we want to run our quick slot removal, since I don't want to remove anything from the equipment. So on false, let's run quick slot removal. For the source, this is going to be the player, because this function right now only removes 2 entries for me. One is from the equipment and one is from the player slots. Then on index, we want to use the index from the inputs. So this index right here, or I have another route right here. So I'm going to use that one instead. And we want to check that this is a single removing function, and the execution then goes to this set RI element, so that we actually remove the item itself. So with this node being right here, this means that we are only going to remove item from our quick slots once we have removed all of the items from that specific slot, because this one just simply removes some amount of it, and this one removes it completely. So once we are running out of items, then we are going to remove it from our quick slots. Now let's go to our backpack. So let's open up our backpack master, and let's see. So first thing, we probably want to have a reference to our player. So from our player on our event pickup interaction, let's promote this to a variable, and let's call this player. And then let's set this value, and I'm going to set it over here to be like so. This is getting kind of messy with the wiring, so I'm going to reroute this a little bit. And now to have even less wires, I'm going to disconnect the target from the player and just simply connect our player variable like so. And also I'm going to disconnect this one from the mesh and connect the player like so. There we go. So this is all set up. Now let's go to our remove amount at index, and let's do pretty much the same thing on the bottom one. Let's move this back a little bit, and let's drag in our player. And then as our player, we want to do our quick slot removal. So let's connect this to this false, and then reconnect it to our set RI element. And for the source, we want to use our inventory. Now for the index, let's again use the index from the inputs, so this guy right here, and let's check that we are removing a single instance from our quickslots. Now let's go back to our third-person character, and in the event graph, let's look for our drop event where we are dropping our backpack on the ground. So I'm gonna move the server node back a little bit, and before we run that one, I want to run my quickslots removal right here. And over here, what I want to do is type in the source to be the inventory, and leave both of these values at 0 and false, since I want to remove every single quick slot that is coming from our backpack, since we are dropping this on the ground. Now let's create the actual quick slot widget itself. So let's go to our UI, and to make life easier, I'm gonna just duplicate my UI item data and call this UI quick slot. So UI quick slot, let's open this up. And what we want to have in here, of course, is the styling that I already have. We want the icon to have a binding for the image. So I have a binding for the tooltip, and I have a binding for the background image itself as well. And let's see, now we have a mouse button down. This is something that we are going to use, but we are going to slightly modify this. And on our drag and drop, so on drag detected, we are going to actually remove this because we don't want to drag this nowhere. So let's remove our drag operation. And also we don't need our source variable, so let's delete that one as well. So we are only left with the tooltip, background, keyboard key down, then we have our item, and we are creating our item data inside of this widget right here. So now the first thing that we want to do is get a reference to our character. So let's drag our event construct back a little bit, and let's cast to our character. Then let's get the owning player pawn. We got that, and then let's promote this guy to a variable so we have a reference to our player. There we go. So once we've done that, we can go back to our on mouse button down event right here. Let's drag this back, then let's drag in our player. Then I want to get the quick slots, and I want to set an array element. So let's set the array element. For the index, I'm going to use the index variable that we are going to pass along from the outside. And for the item itself, I want to make an empty item. So once we drag and drop something on top of our quick slots, it's going to set it to that specific item. But once we click with the mouse on it, it's going to simply remove it. And then once we have removed our item, then I want to drag in my player again, and I want to refresh the inventory widget. So let's refresh the inventory, and now this is all good for our on mouse button down. Now let's create a on drop event. So add new override function on drop. There we go. So inside of here, of course, let's drag from our operation and let's cast to our drag and drop item operation. Now from the operation, let's get the tag, and let's get the index of the item. Let's move these out of the way a little bit. Let's drag in our player. Let's get the quick slots. Then from our quick slots, we want to get a copy using the index variable right here. So that specific index, which is connected to this specific quick slot. So let's split our pins, and then on the source, we want to check if this is equal to empty, because we only want to place an item on top of a quick slot if the slot is empty. So let's do an if branch check to see if it's true. If the item is empty, then depending on the tag, we want to do a switch on string, since I only want to accept items from two sources. So I'm going to add two entries. The first one is the player, so the player slots, and the inventory, which is our backpack. Then once we have done this, let's again from our quick slots. So I'm just going to simply copy these two nodes right here, and I'm going to set the array element. So I'm going to set from both of these right here. The index for this array is this index variable that we have right here. So this quick slots index, and the item. So let's make the item, and let's use the item source is the tag, and the index is the index that we are getting from the drag and drop operation, like so. Then once we have done this, we can simply run our, so from the player, we can run our refresh inventory widget. So like so, refresh this one. Then let's return true, and let's copy this true node to all of these execution pins that are left empty, so that we would notify the system that everything has been handled with the drop operation. Now, one more thing that I want to do in the designer, I want to add basically a number on which keyboard key I will use the items. So I'm going to use the keyboard keys from 1 till 8. So what I'm going to do is add a text to the, let's add it to the bottom border so we cannot see it. So for my bottom border, I'm going to change the tint to be black so that I can actually see this, and I want to move my text to the bottom and make it centered. And now let's create a binding for our text content. So create binding, and let's see, so we want to use our index, and for the index we simply want to do a +1. Since the array of course is beginning with the 0, but I want to use keyboard keys from 1 up until 8, so the 0 index is going to be keyboard key 1, and the array index number 7 is going to be the keyboard key 8. So we should be good with this widget right here. Now let's create a new widget, so user interface blueprint widget, and let's call this UI quick slot panel. Let's open this up, and just like previously, let's add a border to this one, and let's make the border the parent, so replace the canvas panel with the child. I'm gonna change the tint of this to be black, like so. Then I want to add a horizontal box on top of this. Make sure this is set to fill, and I'm gonna rename this to be the quick slot box, for example, and let's make this into a variable. The name doesn't really matter. Let's go to the graph, and now let's see, on event construct, let's just simply cast to our character again. Then we can get the owning player pawn, promote this to a variable, so this is our player variable right here. And now let's create a function in which one we are actually going to create our quick slots. So new function, let's call this create quick slots. There we go, create quick slots. Let's drag in our player. Let's get the quick slots. Then from our quick slots, let's do a loop for each. Now from our array element, let's break it. So let's break the array element. On the item source, let's do a switch, and let's connect this to the loop body, and here we need 3 entries. So first one is going to be the player, then we have the inventory, and the third possibility could be empty, so maybe this quick slot is empty. Then as our player, we want to get the player slots, and also we want to get our equipped backpack, and we want to get the slots from our backpack as well. Now what we want to do here is we want to get a copy from both of these right here, so from our backpack and our player, and we want to use the index that is coming from our quick slots. So let's connect that one like so. And then we want to promote these to a variable. So let's drag from one of these, promote to a local variable, and let's call this local item. So we can set one over here. So from the player, we want to set the player slots. Then from the inventory, we want to set one from our inventory slots. And on the last one, we want to create an empty one. So let's make this one and break the item, and let's select our database, and let's type in empty. So we are good with this. Now the next thing that we want to do is, at the end of it all, we want to create a widget, and this widget is our quick slot. We want to create a quick slot. For the item, we can use our local item, and for the index, we want to use the index from the loop, so the array index right here. Then we can drag in our quick slot box, and we can add a child to the horizontal box, and the child is the content of this widget right here. Of course, make sure to connect all of the execution pins as well. Now we can compile and save this, go back to the event graph, and actually run this quickslots function right here. Now let's save this, and now let's actually display this somewhere. So first and foremost, let's go to our UI HUD and let's add in, let's simply look for our quick slot panel. Let's drag that in here. So I'm gonna anchor this to the bottom, and let's see. So I have 8 slots, so 100 units for each, so 800 in the X, perhaps 120 since we have some padding in the Y. So this is minus 400 and this is minus 120, so I'm gonna have it right at the bottom of the screen, so this should be good. Now let's do exactly the same thing in our UI inventory. So let's look for our quick slots panel, and maybe as you're noticing, I'm doing something different. Usually I just create a border and then attach something to the border. Because this is a tutorial, I want to show multiple ways of doing things. So this time we shall do something different, so that we shall actually learn something a little bit different and something new in this video. So again, border to the bottom, minus 400, minus 120, and let's see, I actually want to move these up a little bit, so let's do so. If you want to move it straight up, just select it and use your keyboard key up to move the things up a little bit. So let's compile and save this. Now the last thing left for us to do is actually refresh our HUD. So I'm going to refresh my HUD on every time we remove the UI from our screen. So over here, once we've removed the UI, I'm going to refresh my HUD like so. And so now, once I pressed play, I noticed that my icons do not appear. It does say that there is a military vest, but it's not appearing, and that is because I made a small mistake in the quick slot itself. On the border, I changed the brush color. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to leave it the way it is, because it changes, it tints the brush, the whole brush itself. What I wanted to change was simply the tint to black like so, and that's only for the preview because it's going to be changed based on this thing right here, but we are not changing the brush color at all. So now if we fix that issue, then we can press play, get our items, and you can see that we can add these to our quick slots. Now let's see, perhaps let's add it over here. Boom, you can see our item disappeared from over here, so now this one should disappear as well. There we go. And now if we would try to add this one, you can see it doesn't work from our equipment. It only works from these slots right here. So let's re-add something from our backpack. Let's drop an item to the ground, and you can see those got removed. Now let's drop some of these on the ground, and you can see that these ones are also getting dropped. So this is going to be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know you probably wanted me to create the functionality for actually consuming the items that we have in our quick slots, but as of right now we don't have a health, hunger, or any of those systems that would actually allow us to consume the items. So first we probably need to create those systems before we can actually consume our items. And yeah, we'll probably do that in probably next week, because for tomorrow what I want to do is work a little bit more on our widgets. I want to add the character preview inside of our inventory widget right here, so that we can see our character being drawn and displayed in our widget as well. So like always, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, support me on Patreon, join my Discord, visit my website, and I see you guys in the next video.